Another one.
How often is SQL used in testing? That's a great question. I have seen some jobs that require the tester candidate to know how to use SQL. Do you think it's just some queries or create tables or anything like that? So let me get a sip first. All right. So let's start the clock, right? SQL in testing. Um, I think number one, it depends on the company. All these questions end up depending on the company, right? But I don't think that it is used to the extent that like you don't have to be to honestly for me, you don't have to be an expert for most jobs to be doing for SQL. Now, so I've seen some companies where people have to do like left joins, right joins, and stuff like that, and those are like some of the more complicated, like inner joins and stuff like that. Do they happen often? I don't think they happen that much, but you do have to use SQL, and although it's not often in a lot of situations, the the problem is if you don't know it, if you don't if you don't use it, you lose it. So you still need to keep your SQL skills somewhat up to date. So usually when I'm using SQL, it's mainly for queries, not because a lot of times the application that I'll be working on is it's already the application's already built. So you might need to retrieve some data from a database and stuff like that. So we'll be doing different queries. You might be using different tools. I remember when I was doing the ETL stuff, I would have to be able to create and a lot of stuff was already created. So I would be managing like these queries in these joints in order that we can move like data around. But in a QA job, for the most part, it's I don't really see much of these crazy type queries. It's like honestly, mainly you might have to do. Let's say you're using the UI or the API, and you make a post or you add something to go and check the database to make sure that it's there. You might have to query the data. That might be a little bit complicated. You might need to query some data for analytics or something like that. But the actual use of more complex queries, it's not as much as it's gonna be for a QA person. Um, like on the data side, like for what Mitch does, he probably has to do some crazy complex queries and to create data tables and plots and stuff like that. His favorite to create scatter plots, not my favorite whatsoever, not your card's favorite, but it is totally Mitch's favorite to do scatter plots. But and that's the thing, I think it's very, very important to know SQL, but how much of it do you need to know? I would probably say, get a little bit familiar with the joins and stuff. And the other stuff that you need to know how to do, that you might need to know how to do, you are going to, you can probably figure it out with Google. Maybe ChatGPT if you're into that. But I remember so I was doing some SQL queries because I had to find a particular type of data to plug in, and it ended up being kind of complex. But I was able to get some assistance from the engineers on doing that one. Um, and then at the more that you use these systems, the more that you expand on your knowledge of doing queries, you're gonna get better at it. But the problem is, if you don't use it often, then you're gonna lose it. So what I would recommend is that to continue keeping your SQL skills fresh, you probably want to go to maybe like a codewars.com or whatever, maybe a hacker rank, whatever you can get some SQL practice, continue refining those skills because you don't want to lose it. And with that, you know, I honestly, like, for my whole career, I've never had to be like that much in debt to using SQL. I remember when we were building a new application that was adding to a Cassandra database, I did automate some of that SQL testing to check the database and stuff like that. But it still was pretty simple queries, to be honest. It was still pretty simple queries. Nothing really ever like super super complex. It's mainly can you connect to the database, query the thing that was added, make sure that it's there, make sure all the rows are populated. You might have to do some schema testing to make sure that the schema matches. And that's the part, like, and that part only comes like at the beginning when you're starting a new project, where you are testing the schema to make sure, like, okay, it says it should be an integer. So you're checking to make sure that you try to send a string to it or characters to it, and you get an error saying no, that's not part of the schema. You might try to say something that takes 50 characters. You send 51 characters to it. So those are the types of testing for the SQL that you would do at the beginning. But then also, like, all right, now we're implementing this endpoint, this API, and we add a new like blog post or something, right? Now you go and check the database to make sure that the blog post was added, all the information is there, things like that. But complex queries, not so much. Sometimes you might end up doing it, but it's not going to be the norm. It's not going to be the norm from my experience. It can be different from different companies, but from the many companies that I've been in, I haven't had to use those complex type of SQL queries. All right. So with that being said,
if you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos.